What I want to cover in the next sort of half hour or so is just to give you some basic insights so you can sort of drive the AI car sort of safely. And a lot of people ask me, Mike, is AI going to steal my job? I don't think so much steal as reshape. And there's lots of parts of our jobs that we hate doing. They're boring, they're repetitive. And wouldn't it be nice if the AI could do some or all of that and free up time for us to spend more time on the bits of our jobs that we do enjoy? And I hope there are some bits you enjoy. And I bet they're the ones that you are great at and also add most value to the business. And there's a second win here, not only giving you more time for the bits you enjoy doing, but actually making you 10, 20, 30 times more effective or efficient at the bits you're good at. Now, my youngest daughter said, Daddy, now you're 62, does AI mean ancient intelligence? Now, she's probably right on that. I actually call it augmented intelligence, because it takes my latent abilities and augments them. We're going to use a little polling tool in a moment, but I just want to highlight for you that, especially if you're a Microsoft house, you will probably see a little green shield sitting in the top, perhaps right-hand corner of the screen. And this will ensure that you're in, quotes, kind of the safe area of your license. And I know a lot of people perhaps a bit reticent to start using the technology. The really great way to learn this is just to go and practice and play and try different things out. So do look out for that little green shield. If it's not there, I'd suggest stop, think, go and ask an expert, check with IT before going any further. Now, AI isn't new. It's been around, depending who you speak with, since maybe the 1940s with Alan Turing and Bletchley Park, certainly in the 50s and 60s and beyond. If you use facial recognition on your phone, that's AI. You probably ask Alexa, or maybe ask Fitbit, or maybe ask Netflix for suggestions. That's all using AI. But what is perhaps new for all of us is this generative AI, this Copilot, ChatGPT, everybody seems to be talking about. And that's, for most of us, only been around for about 2 or 3 years. What you may not know is how these language models actually work. They're trained on enormous amounts of data. Think the internet. And the algorithms are analysing them for patterns in human language. Hence why it's called a language model. And actually all it's doing is it's trying to guess the next set of words in a sentence to answer a question that you've given it. So if I asked it, what colour is the sky on a lovely summer's day? Well, normally it's perhaps blue, but at dawn and dusk it might be a wonderful purple or orange or gold. And if you live in Birmingham, it's grey and overcast all the time. Now, predictive texting isn't new. And just think, have you ever been embarrassed where you sent a text and it's also changed the word and the meaning and it's embarrassed you as a result? We've all been there. So this prediction, this second guessing the next set of words isn't new. I want to dispel a myth. This is not Google search on steroids. It's a very different beast. If I ask Google the same question 10 times, I get the same answer 10 times. Not so with a generative AI model. And there's a clue in the title, generative. If I ask the same question 10 times, I could get 10 similar answers. I could get 10 very different answers. And that's because of something called stochastic. It's just a fancy word for randomness. When you run a generative AI request, you may be the very first person on the planet to see that image, that video, that bit of text. Whereas the Google search is accessing existing information on the internet, with a generative model, it's creating brand new stuff. So rather like motor cars and horses are both forms of human transport, but they're very different forms. So Google search and generative AI, they're very different beasts. Most people never get taught the key concepts, and so I'm going to make sure you know those today. I think we may have problems with our internet or with the quiz questions, so I'll ignore those for now. AI doesn't read a language the way that you and I do. It actually breaks the words into smaller units, and they're called tokens, and they get numerical value. Tokens are important for a number of reasons. One is it's a unit of measure, a little bit like how many gallons of petrol does your car hold and how many miles do you get to the gallon? Well, one way you pay for use of AI is through tokens. So it might be, say, $10 per million of tokens that you use. Another important element is that these models have what are known as guardrails, safety mechanisms built in. And the manufacturers put these in, and your local IT may have also put them in. Michael, how much do you help clients with their guardrails?
So within SharePoint and OneDrive, the most important thing is making sure that it can only access and see the data that it's supposed to see.
Yeah.
Permissions, these should be in place anyway for any business. You shouldn't have everybody able to see HR. You shouldn't have everybody able to see board decisions.
Yeah.
But if that isn't done properly, that isn't in place first, then it will go off and find answers for anybody from those areas.
Yeah. So that's an important piece, is to make sure that your local guardrails are set up, as well as having the sort of out-the-box ones that come from the manufacturers. Ever wondered why they call it Chat GPT? It's because it's designed to be chatted with backwards and forwards the way we do with humans. Again, very different from a Google search. You never have a conversation with Google. And rather like when you're working on a problem with colleagues, you go backwards and forwards a few times. You don't often get the ideal answer on your first iteration. You try different angles. You maybe bring other people into the conversation. Well, these models are designed to be chatted with and iterated with, and that's when the magic happens. The next thing to be aware of is what's known as hallucinations. And this is a feature of large language models. This is when it gives you an answer that looks plausible, but actually is factually incorrect. So I always say, keep your critical eye open at all times. In the same way, if a member of your team gave you a piece of work, you wouldn't just blindly take it without reviewing it before you pass it to, say, your line manager. So we need to be thinking carefully what we put into these models and what we take out of them. Now, newer models are hallucinating less and less, but don't assume that they are infallible. Humans make mistakes, these machines can as well. The other thing to watch out for is bias. These models are trained on the internet, which has some amazing stuff in it and some, let's be charitable, rubbish as well. So natural unconscious human biases will be in these models too. Example was an IT recruiter in London who, because most of their applicants historically have been gentlemen, not ladies, their first bot was very skewed in favour of gentlemen applicants. Now, they soon spotted what was going wrong and recoded it, but do keep your eye out for bias. I've got to make a small confession at this point, and in 1977, I went to the opening day of Star Wars. I was only 13. It was a friend's birthday. And all Star Wars movies start with a scrolling text of the backstory. It was an evil time of the Empire. When about the fifth paragraph appears at the bottom of the screen, the first paragraph drops off the top and you can't see it anymore. Well, context windows, think of it as short-term working memory. As you're sort of chatting backwards and forwards, some of the early part of your chat might fall out of memory. And people will ring up saying, Mike, it's gone funny. It's forgetting things. Now, I'll show you a trick a bit later how to get around this, but you need to be aware of this in case you think it's looking a bit odd, because it's only got a certain amount of working memory. Just give you a couple of use cases that I am having Copilot do for me day in, day out. One is summarizing emails. Think of all those long emails, chained emails, lots of people. With just a simple prompt, I can say, identify all the key points, and bang, there you go. Another one is meeting notes. And often you see lots of meeting note transcribers on the calls. The end of a training course, I might have done 3 or 4 hours. I've got a huge transcript. I don't want to spend hours going through doing the notes for that. Instead, I can ask it things like, you're a learning expert, pull out the action items. And bang, I've got all the key points in a matter of minutes rather than hours. Goes back to that point of AI not stealing your job, but stealing the rubbish parts of your job, allowing you more time for the fun and value-adding parts. I'd much rather be enhancing my courses, building new courses, rather than inscribing and writing out notes. Now, it all starts with a thing called a prompt. And if you've ever bought a coffee from a Nero's or Costa's, other chains are available, you probably prompted the barista, a large latte, extra coffee, 2 sugars, please. Because the person before and after you is probably asking for a slightly different drink. And prompts are in effect the input you provide to the model. Now, often in the form of, say, a sentence or a question, or maybe several sentences. It might be some kind of goal or challenge. And that will then guide the output of the model. And techniques can range from very simple to very complicated. So I will say a school teacher looking at photosynthesis. I might start with a simple, what is it? Then I might want to expand it. Well, what are the different stages? Was it carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, water? You can imagine the different parts of it. I might then want to amplify. Why is it so vital to the Earth's ecosystem? Well, I think without it, within a week, we'd all be dead from carbon dioxide poisoning. There are loads and loads and loads of different techniques. And one thing I'd recommend is to get used to some of them, get comfortable, and then learn a few more, and then learn a few more. A little bit like learning a foreign language. Learn a bit of grammar, get good at that, and then add to it and add to it. An optional item is called personas. I'd recommend you think about using was a very powerful technique in your prompts. So you might ask it role play, project manager, HR manager, strategy manager. Top tip, don't just ask for project manager, ask for a bit more flesh on the bones. The reason is these models are trained on the internet. And after 40 years of projects, I know there's lots of people out there who claim to be a project manager who aren't. So I would ask for, say, project manager of 30 years experience in the, I don't know, manufacturing sector with global qualifications of Prince 2 and PMP. When the model's looking for people that meet that criteria, it's more likely to find a real project manager and give you a much better quality answer as a result. Something else you never get taught, when did it leave school? What's called the cutoff date. Now, these models are trained for months and months, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they're released so you and I can use them. But the teams behind them don't tend to then go and keep the information up to date. So within a week, within a month, it doesn't have up-to-date information unless it's got a live internet connection. Now, if I was looking for project management stuff, there's loads in there. But if I've been tracking the stock market since Trump's intervention in Iran, it wouldn't have that information in there. And you can ask it, when is your cutoff date? It could be almost 2 years ago. And that's maybe why you think, it's rubbish, it doesn't know this stuff. No, it won't, because it hasn't been kept up to date. So check its links to the internet. Often asked, is prompting an art or a science? Probably a bit of both, but there are some key things you can do. You won't be surprised to hear that the clarity of goal is very important. Imagine these language models rather like some very bright summer graduate students working for you from Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard. Bright, enthusiastic, but they do need governance. You need to brief them, maybe ask them clarifying questions. And like with humans, if I give you a vague thing to do, I'll probably get a vague answer. It's the same with these models. Giving it clear context. And this is where it's a little bit like Goldilocks and the porridge, not too hot, not too cold. Giving just the right amount of background information examples, because you can overload the models with too much stuff, like you can with humans. You can set limits. Stock market just in the last 3 weeks. Tone. I might want a blog post, an email, an essay in the style of William Shakespeare. And then the final bit, again, another big difference to Google search. And because you're a special group today, I'm going to share my magic hot tip. Prompting has 3 parts to it. Most people only do part 2. Part 1 is planning and preparation. Who'd have thought planning was important in life? Failure to plan, planning to fail. Part 2 is then the prompt. And part 3, which almost nobody ever does, is fine-tune, iterate, polish. It's just going backwards and forwards. And that's when the magic really happens. You would never think of reiterating and polishing with a Google search, but you do with these models. Let me give you an example of a well-defined prompt. So Monday nights is numpty Mike Dad cooking tea for the family. So our local Chinese gets a lot of work on a Monday evening. I'm not very good in the kitchen. Simple objective, spaghetti carbonara. Context, we're vegetarians, no meat. Limits, please, no more than 20 minutes or Michael burn the dinner again. Tone, please keep it very simple for a complete idiot in the kitchen. Now here is what I would define as a poor structured prompt. Unless I'm a Michelin star chef and I don't need much in terms of directions. But for numpty Dad Mike, this is no use at all. This is the output I get from that well-structured prompt. It's given me a clear portion control. So my wife and I, 2 children, actually we got 2 dogs, better make that 6 portions. Clear instructions. It's even given me a table. I didn't ask for the table. I just thought, oh gosh, it's Mike, he's hopeless. Let's put a table in as well. So that is poor prompt, and that is good prompt. You can immediately see the difference in the output quality. And I'm going to make no apologies for banging that safety risk drum. Always double check what information you're sharing and what you're taking out, as you do with any other information that you're working with in your business. I asked ChatGPT, could you give me some of the top mistakes that beginners make? Intrigued. The first one was vague prompts, which we mentioned a couple of times. The second one was ensuring you check for hallucinations. But the third one really tickled me pink. Not iterating. So I've said that great prompts, it's planning, prompting, and then fine-tune iterating. And that was the third biggest mistake that OpenAI came out with. And I honestly did fudge the results on this one. That's what it came up with. Want to leave you with Mike's hidden tip. If you're not sure how to do a prompt, why not ask it how to do a prompt? You'd never think to ask Google search, well, hey Google, how should I phrase my question? You just ask. So I could say, help, I don't know how to create a prompt for, and then explain what it is. And actually this is getting more important because some of the early models from about 3 years ago were very forgiving of poorly defined prompts. A little bit like when you were at school age 5, your teacher was very forgiving of poor spelling and poor handwriting. But when you were 18, they were not forgiving of poor spelling. Well, these modern models, they are very unforgiving of a badly formed prompt. However, a well-crafted prompt will give some amazing results from it. So actually getting better at prompting is becoming a necessary skill with the more modern models. So if you're not sure, just ask it for help. So I'm going to pause there and pass back to Mike. We're going to do some live demonstrations. Now, live demos are always fraught with difficulty because the internet can sometimes take over, but we'll certainly give it a go.
There you go, Mike. Would you like to run through your ones first?
Certainly, certainly. So there's stacks and stacks of tools that are available out there. And I don't pretend I know all of them. I'm not sure anybody can. But a couple of my favorites. The first one is called Napkin. And what Napkin allows you to do is to take a bit of text and spin up a visual representation. So let me highlight this bit of text. It's busy writing something for me. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got zero ability to create images and pictures. But what I can do here, I can highlight a bit of text and it will come up with dozens and dozens of different ideas as to how I could take that text and turn it into images and pictures. And it's got potentially hundreds of images that you could choose from. Now, this might not be the quality that goes on your website, goes on your internal marketing documents, but I've seen these on LinkedIn, I've seen the training courses. You can actually edit from within Napkin itself. You can then cut and paste it to PowerPoint or slides. I'm dyslexic, and being called Michael doesn't help, A before E. So I don't like loads of text. I much prefer sort of a picture, the old sort of a picture paints 1,000 words kind of thing. Another slightly quirky one is called Ybot. Now, you may have come across a management technique where you just keep asking somebody the question, why? Well, why is that? Why do you always do that? Why historically haven't you done something else? Now, if you've got small children or nephews and nieces, this is how children learn. Why, mummy? Why, mummy? Why? It drives you potty as a parent, but it's a very effective technique. So what this will do, you put your challenge in. So I've asked it, why do we yawn? And it will start and it'll ask the first why question. It'll then ask a second why on the answer from the first, and then a third and a fourth and a fifth. And it will carry on just asking why, breaking down your problem into smaller and smaller pieces. So I was looking last week why my project was always over budget. I let it run for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then I stopped it. And then I started to read through the different sort of branches on this sort of tree structure. And in many cases, a lot of what it was telling me was either perhaps obvious or I've heard of before. But invariably, there's one or two moments where you think, I haven't thought that, or I'd forgotten about that particular technique or angle. This was a couple of Caltech students getting bored one weekend using AI to come up with a rather unusual way of looking at things. Probably my favorite tool, and this one, Tool of the Year 2024 and 2025, is called Google Notebook. Originally designed as a research tool. The idea is you start by gathering all your materials. Now, when I was a teenager back in the 1700s, when I was writing, say, an essay, I would go to a brick building called a library, where they had tables and chairs and books, and I would gather all my books and maybe videos, photocopies, all my materials, and then I'd start structuring out my essay and start writing it. In the modern world, you start by collecting all your documents, and you can even do searches. So part A is to gather all your materials. Now, here's a very important note. This is called a grounded tool, and it'll only look at the data you put into the sources. There's no live link to the internet. So you can control the quality of the data. Now, if you put up garbage data, you'll get garbage answers, but you can assure the veracity of the information. So if I asked it, what was yesterday's football results? Because I've not uploaded any football data, and it's got no live links, I know the BBC News site, I will confuse the poor thing and come back and say, very sorry, I've got nothing on football. I can tell you loads of stuff about management tools from what I can see in the sources, but I've got nothing on the football. While that's wearing away, I'll show you another new feature. The default is you just chat with it, but you can put it into what's called a learning mode, where it'll act as a teacher, a coach, a mentor. Or you could even give it a custom persona. So imagine I was doing maybe a history essay. I could say, my goal is to pass my history assessment. I want you to act in the role of a professor of history of medieval history, if I was doing something like, say, Chaucer. And that way, whenever you're chatting with it, it would adopt that persona. Here we go. It says, very sorry, I've got nothing on the football. I can tell you lots about icebreakers and stuff. Then I could ask it a question, or maybe I could say, give me an icebreaker that lasts 5 minutes. And if it can find information in the sources, it will then spin you up an answer. Plus, it will show you citations as to where it found the answer from. So again, if you want to go and check the sources for its veracity, you can do that as well. Whilst that's whirring away over there, want to go over, here we go. So it's now come back and it's come up with a couple of ideas for me. And if I want to, I could click and it would show me which page, which document it had found that from. Now that's what all things like Copilot, ChatGPT can do, but where this takes over is in what's called the studio mode, when you can start to look at your data, analyze it in a whole different raft of ways. The first is you can have an interactive mind map view. Not everybody likes these, but for many people, they prefer a visual way of looking at the data. And it's a little bit like a top-down sort of table of contents. But if I click on any of the boxes, say persuasive pitching, it's interactive. It will go and spin me up an answer, again, based on the sources about persuasive pitching. And that will take a minute or two. So whilst that's cooking, let me show you something else in here. They've now added things like quizzes. And so here's an example of a quiz question. It even gives me a hint. So I wanted to practice for an exam. I could use the quizzes. And there's a nice feature here that on any of the quiz questions, if you want, you can ask it to go into more detail. There's an explain button. So over here, you can see it's come back with that interactive feature that I just asked for from the mind map. But if I go and explain to exactly the same thing, it would give me a deep dive answer. Because you might want to know actually a bit more, why was it the right or the wrong answer? You just do a quick refresh. They've recently added the ability to create PowerPoint slides from scratch. So I asked it to create one about facilitation and using a dinosaur theme. So this took about 5 or 6 minutes to create. Now, this might not be the final presentation you'd used, but they can certainly get you 70, 80% of the way. Now, again, I've got 0 writing skills. This is brilliant for somebody like me who's got no ability to create anything in a creative manner. You can also now spin up as well a whole suite of infographics. So this is using claymation. If you know the Wallace and Gromit, so this is using the same source documents and creating an infographic. Again, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes. Or another version over here is you can create one. This is using a Lego brick style. A little bit of fun. And recently the text has improved dramatically. Prior to that, most of the text was garbage, but it now can spell properly as well. You can also create your own TikTok style videos. What it will do is create what looks and feels like a PowerPoint presentation, but with a voiceover. And then you can download that as an MP4 file. So if you're perhaps spinning up videos to say your onboarding process a lot quicker and easier, you can just create standard Word documents, but some people still like text, and then that's fine. And as well as having some standard things like study guides and blog posts, because it's got AI built into it, it will analyze the source documents, think, oh, this is a notebook about say, manufacturing or about facilitation, and it will suggest documents appropriate to the source documents. Or you could just create your own. So I do a lot of frequently asked questions on my training courses. So if I don't like any of its suggestions, you can, in natural language, tell it what you want to. Final bit I want to show you in here is the ability to create podcasts. What you're hearing is two AI-powered podcasters having a chat, having a conversation. They giggle, they say and basically they cut over each other like married couples do. That isn't even the best part. Yes, I've got a question. What is the edge technique? You can pause it in the middle of a conversation and have a live chat with it and ask any question about anything in the source documents. And this is why it won Tool of the Year 2 years in a row. I show this partly because it's where I think the technology is going. Quite why we're still using QWERTY keyboards that were designed for mechanical typewriters 100 years ago. I think natural voice will be the way of the near future. And this gives you an idea of how you can start now to talk to the machines in real time. Everything I've shown you in the last 10 minutes has a free to use version. Yes, they have paid plans as well, but the free to use ones you can use at home immediately. Again, be very careful any data that you're putting into these and taking out. Michael, do you want to show a bit around Copilot?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me for 1 second once we get switched over. This is a more day-to-day personal example for me. One of the things we do a lot of is write reports that have a lot of detail. And one of the things I've always struggled with is being concise and sharing the most important information, because I get excited by all the detail and I want to cover everything. The other thing I'm really aware of working in a small business is that time is always at a premium. So if I have written up a document in the past, I have to ask someone else to review it. But now with Copilot and with the live data, before taking time out of anyone else's day, I can pull it up and I can ask it to generate some ways to improve my document. Now, like Mike was talking about on the prompts, something that I might come and say, suggest ways to improve this document. It's built in to actually give a much smarter and clearer prompt to the system. So we'll click that and allow it to generate. And what we found with these licenses, with this setup, the amount of time that you need to save during a week or a month for it to pay for itself is only 1 or 2 hours per person that's using it. I don't know how anyone else finds it, but when it comes to summarizing and improving documents, that can almost take, somehow writing less takes longer than writing more. Oh, okay. We'll just give it a reload. Again, the perils of trying to do this live. It worked fantastically when I gave it free goes before, just before the webinar. So the kind of content it will come back with is around tone, around the structure of language, where to put more focus. So all of these things is really valuable, and it's be something that somebody could take 1 or 2 hours reading a document. I'm going to drop that for now because we seem to be having some issues with it. And I'm going to come back over to the main presentation just to summarize what we've run through today. So The message today around readiness is that anybody using a Windows computer, which is most people, have access to Copilot Chat, the free version. It is safe. It has that green tick. If you put it in, it's any questions, any information you put in, it is kept private. I think Mike's given a good overview today, but a big part of working your way through an AI strategy is picking the right AI for the right job. There's Notebook has a really specific use, Napkin has a really specific use, Copilot has a really specific use, and though you can try to get them to do bits of it, you're only really going to get the most out of it if you pick the right tool for the job. When you know which way you're heading, we think it's important to always check security. That's the first step on our roadmap. You don't want to accidentally overshare. You don't want to cause more damage than the use you're getting out of the tool. And as well, where it's new and everybody is just getting used to this new world, I think training and hands-on training, real-life examples is really what helps people get the most out of these tools. And getting the most out of it is the difference between saving a couple of hours a month or saving a day or 2 days. And I know pretty much everybody I know wishes there was more time in a day. And once you're using it, there's going to be no stopping to the learning. It's a process. We all have to get used to learning new skills. I think, Mike, you were saying that the releases that have come out in the past 2 weeks, we've gone through, well, what versions have we gone through already?
We've gone from 5.2 to 5.3 to 5.4, and you hardly have time to reacquaint yourselves before a new version has hit the market.
There's always new tools, there's new things to do. So the mindset is definitely to pick something that's useful, start using it, learn about it, get that bedded in, then do another review, work out how to keep using it better. Brilliant. Any closing remarks?
Well, to my mind, the way to learn this is like driving a car. You need to get in it and get miles under your belt. Get your fingers on the keyboard, or get your headset on and actually talk to the machines as well. And if you're not sure where to start, why not ask it? Like I say, it's not like a Google search. It's a very different beast. And we have a different way of approaching using these. Think of it as your very bright summer students, or maybe actually very bright DPhils who've just passed their doctorates. That's the level of intelligence some of these models are at. So if you're not sure, just ask.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's everything from us today. Thank you for coming on the webinar. We'll be in contact if you have any follow-up questions about using AI securely. If you think that you would like some guidance training from Mike around AI, can vouch for it. I think one of the most important things is for decision makers and business leaders to really understand AI, because others in your company will be looking for you to set that pace of change in the approach. And yeah, until you've got some miles under your belt, you won't know where to start.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.